Today is a special day. How many of you know it's Palm Sunday today? All right? This is the day that Jesus entered Jerusalem. And the people were excited, right? They were excited. They welcomed him as a king. But what I want you guys to do right now, if you would just hold up your foam fingers. Just wave them. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start off a little different today. I'm going to do something. In just a moment, I'm going to yell out a sports team. And if you like that sports team, I want you just to wave this and cheer, okay? But just to practice, on the count of 3, I want you to wave and cheer, okay? Right? 1, 2, 3. Wave and go, yeah! All right. Awesome. Okay, so now, how many of you like the A's? Uh-oh. No brawling, okay? No brawling in the church. All right, how many of you like the 49ers? All right. How many of you like the Raiders? Yeah. All right. How many of you like the Sacramento Kings? Awesome. Awesome. How many of you have ever been? You guys can put those, you can hang on to them. Those are just a memento of the message today. But I wanted to ask you a question real quick. How many of you have ever been to a sporting event and saw some crazy fans, right? Right?
Right here.
You know, a simple definition of a fan is an enthusiastic admirer. Right? Someone who has a lot of enthusiasm and shows their admiration through that enthusiasm. Some people will go so far as to paint their face, right? Have you ever seen that? Some people will paint their bodies. You're like, whoa, beer belly, come on, But they will do that, right? They just go all out. Some will wear team jerseys. Some people will have foam fingers, a little bigger than this, but they'll have foam fingers. I mean, they go crazy. Fans can definitely be enthusiastic. But here's the thing about fans. What I've found true about fans is that, as hard as they cheer, as enthusiastic as they are, they can be fickle. If the team isn't doing well, fans that were cheering so loudly can suddenly become the harshest critics. Have you ever seen that? Have you noticed that? Yeah. They will scream out obscenities at the coach. They will yell at the players because they're not performing the way they think they should perform. Not that they could do any better whatsoever, right? But they're just yelling at these people. If a particular team isn't doing well, sometimes fans will go so far as to root for another team. They'll be like, forget that team. I'm not going to be a 49ers fan. I'm going to be a Raiders fan, or I'm going to be this, right? Because it's like they're just like, I'm done with them. They're not performing the way that I want, the way that I expect. We call those fair weather fans, right? Fans are all about themselves. It's all about, what can you do for me? How can you entertain me? Right? If you're entertaining me, then I'm your fan, and I will scream for you, and I will do all that stuff. But disappoint me, and I'm done. Don't require anything of me. You're here for me. That's what a fan is all about. Let me tell you this. Did you know that Jesus had a lot of fans? He had a lot of fans. There were enthusiastic admirers of Jesus. They followed his ministry closely. Some of them, they followed his ministry because they wanted to see his miracles, because he was healing people, and they were like, whoa, I want to see that. Or maybe they just wanted to experience it themselves. Some of them were there following Jesus because they wanted a free lunch. Because he would do things where he would take a small little lunch and multiply it and feed thousands of people. And they were amazed. And they were like, yeah, Jesus. Woohoo! Right? We love you. They would cheer so hard for Jesus as long as he was doing what they expected, what they wanted. Well, here's the thing. Today is Palm Sunday. And this is the day that Jesus enters Jerusalem. And word got out that he's on his way. And he's done so many miracles, and there's so many fans all throughout Israel. They're just going crazy. Yeah, Jesus, right? So that's what they do. They get together. They grab palm branches. That's why it's called Palm Sunday, okay? And they would throw these palm branches in front of him, and he would walk on them or ride his donkey, his colt, over them. And this was a way to welcome their king. They were excited. They were excited that Jesus was here. Let's read this together. John chapter 12, verse 12 through 19. This is what it says. The next day, the news that Jesus was on the way to Jerusalem swept through the city. A large crowd of Passover visitors took palm branches and went down to the road to meet him. They shouted, "Praise God, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hail to the King of Israel." They called him the King. Jesus found a young donkey and rode on it, fulfilling the prophecy that said, "Don't be afraid, people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming, riding on a donkey's colt." Many in the crowd had seen Jesus call Lazarus from the tomb, raising him from the dead, and they were telling others about it. That was the reason so many went out to meet him, because they had heard about this miraculous sign. Then the Pharisees said to each other, "There's nothing we can do. Look at how many have gone after him." Jesus definitely had fans that day, right? I mean, if they had foam fingers, they would have been waving them, right? They literally treated him like a king. They even called him their king. But here's the thing. That was Sunday. That was Sunday when it was popular to be a fan of Jesus. But 5 days later, on Friday, those same people that cheered for Jesus, called him their king, they were the ones that called out, "Crucify him." 5 days. That's all it took for these same people to turn from fans to critics to enemies. I want to read with you what happened when Jesus was arrested. Mark 15, 6 through 15, it says this: "Now it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner, anyone the people requested. One of the prisoners at that time was Barabbas, a revolutionary who had committed murder in an uprising. The crowd went to Pilate and asked him to release a prisoner as usual. 'Would you like me to release this king of the Jews?' Pilate asked." Remember, this is what they called Jesus. They waved palm branches. They threw him at his feet. They called him the King of Israel. And Pilate says, "Listen, I can release somebody. Here's the King of the Jews," right? Woohoo, right? Remember back on Sunday? Woohoo! Right? "Or I can release this murderer." Pilate asked, for he realized by now that the leading priests had arrested Jesus out of envy. But at this point, the leading priests stirred up the crowd to demand the release of Barabbas instead of Jesus. Pilate asked them, "Then what should I do with this man you call the King of the Jews?" Notice he says, "You call him that." They shouted back, "Crucify him." "Why?" Pilate demanded. "What crime has he committed?" But the mob roared even louder, "Crucify him." So to pacify the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. You see, in those 5 days before Jesus was arrested, it had become unpopular to be a fan of Jesus. The people who were laying down palm branches were fans of Jesus because they thought he was going to lead them in revolt against the Roman Empire. They were looking for a warrior king, someone to rescue them from Rome. And instead, Jesus preached things like, love your enemies, do good to those who hurt you. And that's not what they wanted. They didn't like that. So they turned on him. Because that's what fans do. They're all about themselves. As long as you're doing what they want, as long as you're satisfying their desires, they're good. They're your biggest fan. But if you deviate from that, if you do anything different, they'll turn on you. But you know what's interesting? Those people didn't interest Jesus. You see, Jesus doesn't want fans. Jesus wants followers, not fans. In fact, Jesus wants more than just followers. He wants committed followers. A few weeks prior to Palm Sunday, Jesus had a conversation with his disciples. And he began to describe what would happen in the future. What would happen when he entered Jerusalem. And he explained to them that once he got there, he would be crucified. But then, 3 days later, he would be raised from the dead. This shocked the disciples. They're like, no way this is happening to you. No way. And Jesus assured them it would. He began to reveal to them something that was profound. He said, listen, after this happens, I want you to understand what I'm looking for in my followers. What kind of follower I want you to be. And this is what he told them. I want you to look at this with me. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 24 through 25, this is what it says. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you want to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways. I'm going to stop there because I want to talk about this. If you want to be a follower of Jesus, Jesus says, listen, you got to stop being selfish. You see, what happens so often with us, especially in America, is we try to fit God into our schedule, right? Fit God into our life. God, I can fit you in here, here, and here, but not over here, right? On that Palm Sunday, people praised Jesus as he passed by, but many of them praised him for two reasons. One, because of the miracles, the healings. But the second reason is because they wanted him to deliver them from Rome. Their praise was tempered by this attitude of, what can you do for me, Jesus? What can you do for me? But what we have to get to is a place where we say, you know what? It's not about me, it's about you. You see, Jesus needs to be the center of our life, not us. But see, when we try to add God into our schedule, into our plans, then Jesus really isn't the center, is he? We are. We're the center. And that's not how it should be. Jesus needs to be the center. We need to be asking God, where do you want me to go? Where do you want me to live? What job do you want me to get? How do you want me to respond in this situation, God? We need to stop this attitude of just trying to add God into our life. And we need to make him the center of our life. You see, that's the kind of follower that Jesus expects. Is he the center of your life? Is every decision that you make qualified with, is this what God wants for me? Is this what he wants? Let's look at what else it takes to be a committed follower of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 16, 24 through 25, it continues. I'm just going to read it from the beginning again. It says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you want to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross." Take up your cross. Wow. A committed follower of Jesus is all in. Because taking up your cross is what? I mean, you guys know what happened to Jesus. When he picked up his cross, he was going to his death, right? He was all in. And that's what he's saying to us. We got to be all in. There is no halfway. A committed follower of Jesus doesn't quit when things get tough or don't go their way. A committed follower of Jesus will follow him even all the way to the cross. These people who were waving their palm branches were praising Jesus' name when they thought he was going to do what they wanted. But when they realized he wasn't going to be the king they expected, they turned on him. They didn't want anything to do with him. How many of us will follow Jesus even when he doesn't do what we expect? Even when he doesn't do what we want? Think about this for a moment. What's the thing you're praying for the most? You're desiring God to do for you. Ask yourself this question. If God said no, would you still follow? Would you still follow him? Maybe it's a healing you've been waiting for. Maybe it's a relationship you've been asking God to heal. Maybe it's a job or a promotion that you've been desiring and praying for. How many of you would follow Jesus through tragedy and pain? Because that's what he's saying here. He's saying that's a follower of me. So many Christians believe that when you serve God, everything is supposed to be good in your life. But you know that that's not something God promises? In fact, if you look at Scripture, there's example after example of faithful followers of God going through tremendous, even horrendous circumstances. And maybe you're here and you're like, Pastor, I didn't want to hear that today. I want to hear, wait, God's going to bless me and all that. But listen to this. Listen to what Jesus himself says to his disciples. In John 15, 20 through 21, he says, "Do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than the master. Since they persecuted me, naturally they will persecute you. And if they had listened to me, they would listen to you. They will do all this to you because of me, for they have rejected the one who sent me." Jesus doesn't promise that we're going to have a beautiful, wonderful life that's pain-free. He doesn't promise that. In fact, he promises that we're going to experience persecution and pain and suffering. A committed follower of Jesus sticks it out regardless, though. They will endure because they're committed to him. They take the good with the bad, knowing that all we are ever promised is that in the midst of both our good and our bad, Jesus will never leave us nor forsake us. In other words, he is with you. Whether good or bad, he will be with you through it. That's what you're promised. There's a story of a little girl who, while walking in a garden, noticed a particularly beautiful flower. She admired its beauty, but as she got closer, she realized, she looked down and she saw that the stem was in this dirt, this gross, icky dirt. So she decided to rescue this flower by taking it and pulling it out of the dirt and washing off all that soil. Well, of course, as you probably have guessed, the flower quickly died and wilted. And when the gardener saw what she had done, he yelled out to her. He says, "Why did you just destroy my most beautiful flower?" And she said, "Well, I just didn't like it in that dirt." And he said, "You know what? I mixed that soil myself. And I planted that flower in the spot that I knew that it would grow the most beautiful." That's how God is with us. He puts us where we're at. And he uses those pains and those pressures and those trials of life to grow us into something beautiful. What I'm trying to tell you is that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. But God is with you. He is with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. In fact, listen to this. In Joshua 1:5, God promises this. He says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." But you know what? What God expects of his followers, what he desires from his followers, is he wants us to say this back to him. He wants us to say, "God, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you, no matter what. No matter what I go through, I follow you." A fan can't make that promise. Only a true committed follower of Jesus can make that promise. Let's continue to read what Jesus expects from his committed followers. Again, starting from the beginning, it says this: "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'If any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it.'" You know what's interesting is many of those people who gathered to throw palm branches at Jesus' feet and shouted his praises did so because it was the popular thing to do. It was popular. Come on, let's go hang out with Jesus. Let's go praise Jesus. Woohoo, right? It was the popular thing to do. At that one moment, at that one brief moment, it became trendy. How many of you have ever done something that was trendy, right? You did something because all your buddies, all your friends were like, "Hey, you got to go to this restaurant. It's really great." Or "Man, you got to go over here. Man, it's so cool." And you did it because they said, "Hey, you should do it," right? We do that, right? We follow the crowd sometimes. What's interesting is that later, at Jesus' trial, shouting "Crucify him" became the trendy thing to do. In fact, for a brief moment, it was the trendy thing to do to make a mass murderer and criminal their hero. At the parade, it was trendy to offer praise to Jesus. Everybody is doing it. But at the trial, to speak out for Jesus was risky. It put them at risk. To say something on behalf of Jesus at his trial, that would have gone against the crowd. You see, fans follow the crowd, but committed followers stand alone if need be. Think about that for a moment. Fans follow the crowd, but a committed follower will stand alone if need be. Stand up for Jesus. They'll stand up for Jesus when it's the popular thing to do or not. You know, right now in our nation, it's becoming more and more unpopular to be a Christian. We're beginning to see what it's like, what other Christians in other nations have to face. But for a long time in our nation, it was actually the popular thing to be in church, to be a Christian. And so churches were full. I think I really relate to this Palm Sunday. People were waving their palm branches. Yay, Jesus, right? Because it's the trendy thing to do. But what happens when it's not? What happens when it's not? You see, if you're a follower of Jesus and not just a fan, you will risk everything for him. That's what it said. That's what he's talking about when he says, you will lose your life for me, then you'll find it. He's saying, listen, you got to be willing to sacrifice. You got to be willing to go all out. You can't just follow the crowd. There may come a time in your life where being a follower of Jesus is not the popular thing to do. What will you do in that moment? Will you deny being a follower of Jesus, or will you stand up for him and take what comes? Maybe it's a boss at work who is really just anti-God, anti-Jesus, anti-Christianity. And he makes a statement that, hey, anybody who believes that junk is a fool. Well, now you know that he's not going to promote a fool, right? So you have a choice to make. Do you sit there quietly nodding your head as if you agree? Or do you say, no, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. Do you take a stand for him? Or do you follow the crowd? Because, see, a follower of Jesus will stand for Jesus even when it's not popular. Even when it may harm them to do so. Listen to what Jesus says in Luke chapter 12, verse 8 through 9. He says this, he says, I tell you, whoever acknowledges me before men, the Son of Man will also acknowledge him before the angels of God. But he who disowns me before men will be disowned before the angels of God. Man, I don't ever want to stand before God and have Jesus say, I don't know him. I don't know him. How heartbreaking that would be. But think about it in terms of Jesus. When you stand before a crowd of people and you say, I don't know him. I don't know him. Or you don't say anything at all and you go with the crowd. That's not a follower of Jesus. That's a fan. You see, a fan is fickle. A fan is all about me, me, me. What have you done for me lately, Jesus? Are you giving me what I want? Are you doing what I want you to do? But a committed follower never gives up. They would rather die than give up. Whether it's good times or bad, they will follow Jesus. Even when it's unpopular, they will follow him. So the question is, which one are you? A fan or a follower? Ask yourself that question right now. Examine your life and ask yourself, am I just trying to add God into my life? Am I just here at church punching the card, God, I showed up today, When you make decisions, do you make them asking God, God, what do you want from me? What do you want from my life? What's interesting about that, I've had so many people, family members, and even family members, friends, people in church who come to church and they serve God, and then they have children. And their children, somewhere along the way, they get on fire for God. And they feel called to the ministry. Now, if you don't know, this is not a really high-paying job, okay? And parents want their children to be taken care of and well provided for and all those good things. And these so-called committed Christians who come to church regularly, who give in the offering, they do all these things. When suddenly their children decide to follow Jesus and become a part of the ministry, full-time ministry, they say, no, no, no. No, no, no. Don't do that. Go be a doctor. Go be a lawyer. Go be anything else. But don't do that. Here's the thing. Are we adding God, or are we making him the center of our life? Is guiding every decision that we make? Or are we making our decisions and then kind of just going, well, I hope God's okay with that, because this is the direction I want to go? Are you all in? Are you all in? No matter what it costs you, are you going to follow Jesus? Even if he doesn't do things the way you want them to. I don't know how many people I talk to who are struggling because Jesus hasn't done something that they want, whether it's healing, whether it's a relationship. And it breaks my heart. And part of me just, man, I want to just pray, God, do it. Just do it so that they'll turn around. But then I realize, maybe he's testing them. Are they truly his followers? Are you willing to follow him even when you don't get what you want? Are you willing to stand alone? This is a tough one. This is one I have to wrestle with sometimes. To stand up in the midst of a crowd or just stand up in front of someone else and say, I am a follower of Jesus. I do believe. When it's not popular.